Welcome to the Health Catalyst podcast. Here we talk about the business of health innovation, and I sit down with industry leaders who have been in the trenches. My goal is to share the lessons and provide practical and actionable advice to help you launch, grow, and scale your business. I am your host, Rodrigo Hutt. Hello and welcome. Today, my guest is Jamey Edwards. Jamey has such a remarkable journey that I really want to spend some time reading his bio, and I just want to make sure that I don't leave anything out. So I will read it. So Jamey is a serial social impact founder on a mission to fix healthcare. Having founded and led multiple companies over his career, he's best known for leading the growth of EMA, one of the leading hospital-based multi-specialty groups in the country, and for co-founding and being CEO of Cloudbreak Health, a company that pioneered video medical interpreting and also merged into a SPAC as part of a $1.4 billion transaction in 2021. Since then, he has been an entrepreneur in residence and the chief platform officer at Startup Health, where he has coached hundreds of founders and recently joined Coslab Ventures-backed company Coco Home as its president and chief strategy officer. He's a father, husband, and he's on the board of Pink Socks Life, who is focused on spreading kindness, the American Heart Association, and several others. Jamey, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Rodrigo, great to be here. Thanks for hosting. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Great. I think that we are here for a treat. You know, Jamey has been a founder, he's been an executive, he has been an investor, he has been a coach, and he's been in the industry in healthcare for many years. And I am super excited of having you today. And in today's episode, I have two key objectives. Firstly, Jamey will be sharing his top 10 lessons, having advised hundreds of founders and having worked at startups, small and medium and big. He's going to be sharing his top 10 lessons and takeaway from his journey. And secondly, Jamey also he will be sharing his top predictions for 2024. And I love this quote that says, it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future, but what the hell, let's try it anyways. So Jamey, let's dive in. So the first question is, what are your top 10 lessons, takeaways, insights from your journey so far?
Rodrigo, it's like just 10. There are probably 20, 30, or 100. And all the lessons have been learned by making mistakes, right? That's how we learn as founders and as people, is like how you make mistakes and just try to not make them multiple times. I would say for me, the first one is that mission is really important and that money follows mission. So when somebody is founding a company, if they come to me and say, oh, I want to build $1 billion company, like that's not the right reason to found the business. It always has to be something that you're super passionate about. And that gets you out of bed every morning and really drives you to succeed in solving the problem. So money following mission would definitely be a part of it. And I think when you talk about mission, it's got to be like fairly specific, right? I'm definitely on a mission to fix healthcare, and I've done that in multiple different ways. But for my companies in particular, like that's been my personal mission. But my companies in particular have had very specific missions in improving hospital-based medicine and restoring the joy of calling back to physicians, as an example, in humanizing healthcare and increasing access to care for limited and proficient deaf and hard of hearing patients. But it's those missions that drive your success, not the other way around. And you always go back to thinking about Elizabeth Holmes and what she was quoted in her company, that she wanted to build $1 billion company, and it's like, look how that happened. So for me as a founder, it's like lesson number one: don't pursue being a founder because you want to pursue money. Pursue it because there's a problem that you really think you need to solve.
and there are plenty of problems in the health industry. So if I what I think is how I think it is that if you have, if you're truly passionate about the industry, and in particular, one of the million problems that lie within the industry, there is going to be plenty of opportunities to have an impact, for sure. So that's your number one.
Number one.
Let's go to number two.
All right, number two, building on mission is really what at Startup Health we call problem founder fit. So instead of product market fit, which to me is a much more business oriented approach to trying to figure out whether your product is actually doing what the market will eventually buy, we look for it to be founder driven. And if a founder is really passionate about the problem they're trying to solve, if they have lived experience in what they're doing, they're like 10x as likely to be successful. So really finding founders who, as an example, in our type 1 diabetes moonshot at Startup Health, a lot of those founders have had diabetes or have diabetes and are trying to solve a problem directly related to what they're experiencing. And, in our experience at Startup Health, like that's the best driver of future success, is a founder who really understands the problem that they solve because of their lived experience.
Yes, and what's your perspective on someone that doesn't come from the industry? You know, people say, "Oh, if you're not from the industry, don't even try it because it's complicated enough." But then I've heard different perspectives from entrepreneurs that have been successful by, launching new ventures in different industries. So, have you seen successful entrepreneurs in the health industry that came from different industries, from other industries?
So, Rodrigo, this is such a good question for a broad variety of different reasons, and it's like hotly debated. My personal view, and by the way, I hate it when I was told what people said to me, which is that healthcare is different, right? Because I was like, look at these lessons we could be learning from other industries. Look at what Apple did in music and then leveraged into iTunes and leveraged into their entire ecosystem. Look at what Tesla did in automotive that eventually leveraged itself into energy. They're always like these tip of the spear revolutions that end up driving an evolution. And I'm like, why can't that happen more in healthcare? And healthcare is highly regulated. It is overwhelmingly complex. And there's a quote, and I'll find it and read it here, by Woody Guthrie that says, and I will tell you if that's the case, we've been very foolish in healthcare because it is an incredibly complicated and overwhelmingly so for patients, for providers, and also for founders looking to start up companies. They have regulatory risk that they need to deal with. They have a very risk-averse industry who uses excuses for a lack of innovation as, look, there are lives on the line. We need clinical evidence in order to push progress forward. And we truly do believe in evidence-based medicine in this country, and I think it's kept a lot of patients safe. And in the same vein, we have to figure out as founders how to navigate that environment to drive innovation down to the point of care. And it's definitely a challenge. I will tell you, I've seen more success in companies where the founder has had some experience they've had in healthcare that they want to fix, either as a patient, and everyone, I like to say we're all patients. But there have been a lot more success with people coming in from inside healthcare and solving the problem from the inside out than I have seen external people coming in and solving it from the outside in. There have been a ton of companies that Silicon Valley has funded and blown through a ton of capital. There's a number that come to mind, but Olive AI could be one of them, right? Hundreds of $800+ million funded into that business, founder from outside of healthcare, and shut down. A ton of unicorns have shut down in the last 6 months. So I think for me, it's about making sure that if you're that founder who's coming from the outside, you've done the initial work on the front end to not just say, I have a great idea, I'm going to roll it out, but you fully research the industry, what your go-to market motion and strategy is going to be, and then the actual problem you're trying to solve and how it's going to drive impact at the point of care.
Yeah, good point. And related to that, in that same kind of vein, do you think big tech companies Apple, Amazon, Google, do they really have a chance in making an impact in the health industry? Because they have big bets. Some have failed. Others are still trying. Um, but do you think that they have a disadvantage or an advantage coming from outside of the health industry?
It's a super interesting question, Rodrigo. When I think about it, you take a look at companies like Google and Apple in particular, Facebook to a certain degree. But when you take a look at what Apple's done, like clearly the Apple Watch, successful device. You've got, if you take a look at Microsoft, Google, and, they both have tried health record initiatives that have failed. Apple's is still in progress in tying people into like Epic My Chart and then having the patient be able to give permission to access patient records and do things like that. But right now, the big problem that is still out there is while those companies are giving us sometimes interesting information about our health, they haven't made it so that that information turns into an actionable insight by the user, because we as patients aren't great consumers of our own health data. And these devices have largely been thought about as wellness devices or fitness devices. They haven't been thought of as clinical tools, and very few of them, as a result, are FDA approved. In fact, if you take a look at something like the Oura Ring, that device is not FDA approved and the data hasn't been clinically validated, et cetera. But there is a device out there that has been FDA approved, but no one knows about it, and it's called the Circle Health Ring. But that's a big challenge, is they don't bring a healthcare mindset to the problem that they're trying to solve. And that's an important context and frame. And I think you've taken a look at companies who've almost been scared out of the industry, or they don't want to have HIPAA compliant platforms, so they decide not to roll something out in that space. It was like when people were talking about telemedicine and Apple, and they said, why can't we all use FaceTime? FaceTime's not a HIPAA compliant platform. So you have those issues. I think the company that's made probably the best inroads that I found most impressive is Amazon. And when you take a look at the fact that they really have a commitment to the healthcare space, acquired PillPack. By the way, it hasn't been a self-developed way of getting there. They've acquired great companies in the space to lead the way. So they acquired PillPack. Now they have One Medical. I think they're going to be one of the interesting FANG companies to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they have a big shot at really, especially around first touch, primary care, and around improving kind of the customer experience. The first few kind of interactions when people have something to, some symptoms or something like that. So yeah, interesting to see what Amazon it's building. I also, Microsoft is also doing interesting work as well around building tools for providers. And also, I really think that Google has a chance at building something interesting around AI and being able to integrate and coordinate data in terms of portability and stuff like that. So I think that there are going to be some things that big tech are going to be able to achieve. But as you said earlier, it's so big and so complex that not one company is going to be able to solve everything.
Yeah, and Rodrigo, I would never count out companies that have brought the type of innovations to market that Google and Facebook and Amazon and all those companies have brought. They also bring huge balance sheets with them, the ability to throw money into problems, as you said before, make big bets. So when you've got the best of the best working on it, I think that could potentially portend for an exciting future. So far, I think they found it challenging.
Yeah, agree. All right, let's move on to lesson number 3.
Lesson number 3, for me, and this has been throughout my career, but it was especially drilled into me at my time as a startup health portfolio company, at my time in YPO, which is a business peer networking group, that your mindset really matters. The psychology of the founder is intrinsically really important. And at Startup Health, we actually developed something that we call the Health Transformer Hierarchy of Needs. And at the base level of the pyramid, our mission and mindset. Mindset is so critically important because we'd all like to think the entrepreneurial journey is this hockey stick. When you're a founder, you're super excited. You're like, this is great. I founded my LLC. I'm going to attack this problem. And you have this unbridled energy and idea that you're going to be successful. And then as you go through it, it starts to look like this curve that slopes down, where the more knowledgeable you get, the harder you realize your journey is going to be. And you start to become way more like realistic. So you move from kind of like uninformed optimism to informed pessimism. And then you almost like cross this line where it gets harder and harder and harder. And one day you're down in what we call like the valley of despair. And it's like, how am I going to make payroll next month? So you've gone through and it's like, okay, great. We founded our company. We're really excited. All right, we're getting smart on how hard the problem is that we're trying to solve, and the fact that technology might not be there yet. And we're starting to like acquaint ourselves with the challenges. And then finally, like, oh my God, 2 weeks from now, I'm running out of funding. How am I gonna cover that? Our job as a founder is to realize that that is one of many of these curves that you are going to go through, and that you can move through this valley of despair by realizing it's just another obstacle for you to maneuver around or over or through. And you move from that to then informed optimism because you've learned through going through that valley that there's a problem there that you could solve, and you've worked on how to solve it, and you may have made traction on solving that issue. And then once you've done that, you're on your way to success and achieving that milestone. And what we've discovered is that that journey, that can be one day in the life of a founder. It could be 1 month. It could be one project, one client, or it could be your entire founder journey. But really, when you take a look at the founder journey, it's more like an upward sloping roller coaster of these curves over time. It is not a straight line. And reading in between the lines is really important for a founder. And their mindset, their ability to stay motivated, stay positive, stay in what we would call a transformational mindset is really, really critical to your success. But it is very, very easy to get down. And so, whether you read the book Grit on growth mindset or whatever it might be, it's really about learning these obstacles, seeing these obstacles as learning opportunities, and being able to plow through them.
Yeah, I can relate to all of that, Jamey. 10 years ago, when I founded my first company, I went through all of those phases. So
yeah.
And what's one thing that you do or that you've done to work on improving your mindset personally? Like what have you found useful?
Yeah, for me, intentionality is really important. And so one of the things we kind of talk about is like put on your own oxygen mask first. Like, how as a founder can you be expected to take care of your team and take care of others if you're not taking care of yourself? So making sure you schedule healthy habits in there, like being able to go to the gym or go for a walk or do whatever it might be so you can refuel and recharge, play golf, go skiing, do a sport, play guitar, whatever it might be. Those are things that I actually will schedule in my calendar and make as part of my routine. Sometimes it's hard and the challenge overwhelms you and you end up reaching, for that donut instead of the apple. I'm particularly guilty of that. Rodrigo, sugar is a weakness of mine. I don't drink, I don't smoke, but dessert, man, I love it. So whenever I fall off the wagon, so to speak, it's like I start overweighting in too much sugar. So I have to remind myself to like get out, start eating healthy again, and do that. And there's also different forms of just regular meditation that are really, really helpful. But for me, it's like you also have to understand what type of person you are. So I'm an extrovert to like the extreme side. So anything I do alone almost drains me. But even being here talking with you like fills my cup. And so for me, I always try and make sure that I'm going out and doing things with my friends, doing things with my family, and building and feeling like I'm part of a community. And that's the intentional thing that I really do most of.
Great. Amazing. All right. So let's move on to lesson number 4.
Lesson number 4 is that, man, healthcare is broken, right? And if, when you take a look at the U.S. In particular, we're over $4.3 trillion of GDP is spent on healthcare. I believe the global amount spent on healthcare is around 10 billion. So the U.S. is 40 to 50% of total healthcare spend. Yet when you look at our WHO rankings, we are 30th. We rank behind some third world countries in the quality of our healthcare system and the resulting statistics of measuring that. I think what we have in this country today is actually really good healthcare, but it's not equally distributed. So unfortunately, only the top 5, 10, 15, 20% of people in the country get access to this great healthcare. And despite wonderful efforts around trying to improve health equity post-COVID. Because before COVID, like no one was really talking about health equity to the degree that it should have been spoken about. But like COVID really revealed the underbelly of our healthcare system and the fact that people did not have equal access to high quality care. It's been a mission of mine from a health equity standpoint over the last 15 years, which is why I ended up, co-founding Cloudbreak, was because I really believe people deserve equal access to care. And limited English proficient and deaf and hard of hearing patients, as an example, are like 4 times as likely to encounter harm. And you can imagine experience, Rodrigo, like you're originally from Mexico, correct?
Correct.
So let's just say you didn't speak English and you showed up in the US and you were in a car accident. People would be running around you speaking in English, and like, what a terrifying experience as a patient. And so Cloudbreak's mission was really to solve for making that a better experience, leveling the playing field, ensuring that patient had equal access to care, and also doing that for providers. What we talk about in this country is really talking about being patient-centric, but I think we've forgotten about our providers, the fact that there's not enough physicians to satisfy all of the needs of patients in this country, and that those physicians, too, are not equally distributed. There are medical deserts in some of our biggest cities, especially here in Los Angeles. We've experienced that because not everybody gets to go to that academic medical institution. They go to their local community hospital, and it might be in a community that can't attract specialists and other, like, the best doctors to practice there. So for me, that is a big driver of the problem. We have a big problem matching cost to acuity in our healthcare system. Why, if you have a flu, are you showing up to an emergency room? Why don't you have access to care other ways? Telemedicine can be something that really helps with that, helps load balance the healthcare system, helps meet patients where they are. It's a very practical tool that should be implemented, not instead of, but in combination with the broader healthcare continuum. This industry has also been like fairly backwards. How come today, Rodrigo, if I said, Rodrigo, go to your doctor and get me a copy of your patient record, how would you do that today?
I would not be able to do it.
Right. You would go and they would say, Rodrigo, that's great. Here's your MRI. We're going to put it on a CD-ROM for you.
Right.
Who has a CD-ROM in 2023? There used to be this thing on Twitter that we had a hashtag WTFax, what the facts, because we can't believe that faxes are still used so broadly in healthcare. The fact of the matter is that technologies that other industries have adopted and taken for granted for 15 years, we're still getting used to in healthcare. Like, how come there's just not a broad healthcare cloud that data records sit in, that they can just give you access to your healthcare record? Why are we faxing things back and forth? Why aren't we using email and video and all those things a lot more than we are? And it's because of the structure of our system. And the final point here is, one of the things that I think is really broken isn't the fact that we don't have technology to solve these problems. It's the care models. The real innovation in healthcare's future is going to be in and around building new models of care that this tech can enable.
Absolutely. And before we get to that, what are some of the factors that contribute to a slower pace of innovation? Like, from your perspective, I know that there are many, but what are the kind of the main things that are slowing kind of adoption? Because it's not only that technology. There are great technology. There's great products out there, but there's something happens where you have things available, but it takes years and decades for physicians or other key stakeholders in the industry to adopt and use.
Yeah, so one, definitely regulatory environment, right? From an FDA standpoint, anything that is diagnostic in terms of its capabilities has to go through FDA clearance, and that process takes a while. For things that are much more driven around, $4.3 trillion, right, creates a huge bureaucracy and a huge sedentary system. It's like, we have all this revenue. If we innovate, we might lose some of this revenue. And so as a result, even though a hospital knows something might be the right thing for it to do, it might impact its programs in a way that, while it improves care for the patient, it decreases the revenue of the hospital. And hospitals have large fixed cost bases and pretty low operating margins already, sometimes in the only just 1% or 3% of the revenue. So in those environments, it's really difficult to affect progress because there's a lot of revenue on the line. And finally, it's like cultural. One of the toughest things in healthcare is that you have two governing bodies in a healthcare facility, as an example. You've got the medical staff, and then you've got the administrative team, right? And they're really two separate governing bodies in a hospital, and they really need to work together in concert for a hospital to run smoothly. But sometimes they don't. And sometimes a hospital CEO will say, hey, we have a problem doing this. Can you guys help us solve this? And they'll be like, well, show me the clinical evidence that we should be doing that. And sometimes those things are at odds. And we should always be doing what's in the best interest of the patient. And sometimes that gets lost because you're worried about malpractice. You're worried about, again, it's just a very risk-averse culture that typically has been much more ingrained in upholding the status quo than it has been in moving the industry forward through innovation.
Right, right. All right, okay. So let's move on to lesson number 5.
So lesson number 5, I kind of hit this vein a little bit before, but we'll do it again because I think it's really important. It's not about the tech. It's about the results that the tech enables. So the best innovations in healthcare aren't really going to be about some new hologram that allows you to do X, Y, and Z. And by the way, we saw this during COVID, right, Rodrigo? Like, none of those technologies were new that led to the adoption of telemedicine. It's like there was a need. We got rid of and knocked down some of the regulatory barriers, and then telemedicine became widely used. It's simple things like that that can really move the needle. That being said, there are some very exciting new technologies out there. AI has clearly, especially with the advent of large language models and ChatGPT, launched what is a little, more than a little of a revolution in terms of people like, how can we document? Can we come up with protocols in a different way? How can AI and chatbots be helpful in addressing the first line of defense in addressing, patient issues? So I think there are some really exciting things that are out there, but the fact of the matter is like any new technology needs to be able to prove an outcome. You're in an environment where investing in new technologies is expensive, and the healthcare, despite all this money being thrown at healthcare, health systems themselves don't have a ton of profit in order to pay for those innovations. And we need to really focus on the fact that, there's some great anecdotal stories that can be told in medicine, but if you're going down the line of getting something that is FDA approved, like that evidence becomes really important, and doctors are trained on evidence-based medicine. So you need to, as a founder, know this, understand it, and bring it to the table throughout your sales cycle. But for me, when you take a look at one of the greatest innovations probably of the last year, it very well might be the Geisinger-Kaiser deal, where they're talking about bringing Kaiser's model to broader community care. Kaiser is on the forefront of implementing, an end-to-end solution for their patients. And if you look at Kaiser and how they see patients, over 50% of what they do from a patient standpoint is telemedicine. But they can do that because they're an end-to-end service provider that owns that patient all the way throughout getting a procedure in a hospital, seeing an in-person visit, prescribing their drugs. They're an integrated provider of services. So they're more uniquely able to do that than in community medicine, where there's a lot of disparate factions kind of fighting for dollars and fighting for time with the patient.
Right, right. And what about if you're a newer company or an emerging technology and you don't have the evidence of efficacy or something to prove, like some of the new digital therapeutics that or wellness products that can not afford to run RCTs, like randomized controlled trials or something like that, because it takes time and takes money. What is it based on trust? If you go and talk to an insurance company, or you go and talk to an employer, or you talk, if you don't have hard evidence, then how can you initially get some traction while you get that evidence?
So there is almost like a curve of expectations when it comes to data. When you are a young startup, it is okay to use other people's studies in your ROI models, right? To say, look, there's a study that's been done in XYZ space. it says that this is your cost per bed day. There's a study that was done on telemedicine that says it could save you XYZ on travel costs. There's another study that says you can improve a lower length of stays by 2 days if you have ready access to specialists at the point of care. And you take all those and you use them and you form an ROI model that tells this plausible story based on evidence. It's just not yours, but largely, no idea is really new under the sun, and someone has largely proven some of these cases ahead of you. So it's okay to tell an anecdotal story. It's also okay to not run an RCT, but just do your own work. I mean, look, we did a study in 15 patients with such and such institution, and we found out the following. And then you get a endorsement and a quote from that person saying, yes, this product helped us do X, Y, and Z. And I think there are things that you can do. As you move up the curve and you get bigger and bigger and you're scaling, the evidence burden becomes higher. And that's where going out and doing randomized clinical trials becomes more important. But I will tell you, at Cloudbreak, and we built a company, doing, that was in 2,000 hospitals. Like, we never did a randomized clinical trial to prove the efficacy of having a language interpreter at the point of care. Digital therapeutics, a little bit different because it's much more diagnostic in what you're looking for. You want your digital therapeutic to be able to say, like, it reduced the following conditions and prevented hospital visits A, and all those different types of outcomes that you might want to see as a result of your impact. But even in those situations, I think people understand companies that are early are not having that same data and evidence burden.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes total sense. All right, let's move on to lesson number 6.
So I have always characterized myself as a servant leader. And I went to a talk the other day and someone talked about enlightened leadership, and enlightened leadership really being like the next level of servant leadership. I've worked in a lot of authoritarian regimes. I've never enjoyed it. And I really believed when I was, running companies, that my goal was to help everyone else succeed. If I could properly develop my talent, if I could get the people closest to the problem to solve it and enable them to do so, and I didn't have to do their job for them, but instead I was like creating this environment where everybody felt empowered to take care of the problem. Like, that to me was what good leadership was all about. My job was to make sure the company was funded, everybody understood our strategic direction, and that I was properly mentoring and coaching my team so they could optimize their success. And if someone left the company because we did a great job training them, it was like, great, we have another alumni out there who's going to spread the word about how great it is to work at a place like Cloudbreak. But I wasn't going to be upset and be like, I can't believe you're leaving. It's like, for me, it's like the servant style of leadership or enlightened leadership is all about optimizing the success of those around you, not your own.
Absolutely. And I agree 1,000%. Let's move on to lesson number 7.
Lesson number 7. If you are a founder and you are not a good storyteller, time to start reading a lot of stories and bone up on that. Every great company is created around a great story. And the reason storytelling is really important is because it literally impacts every single side of your business. You want to hire great employees, you need to build a story that they want to be a part of that's bigger than themselves. You want to bring on great clients, you need to tell them a story that is compelling. By the way, it might not be the same story you're telling your employees, so it might be customized storytelling. You want to go out and raise money from investors. What really drives investors to invest? FOMO, fear of missing out, right? So you've got to tell a story there of the value that you're going to bring and why they should invest in you and be on your train as opposed to somebody else's. So for me, storytelling is crucial to success. And as a founder, it's got to be an ability that if it's not innate, that you are constantly working on. You have to be telling your story out in market, and you've got to make sure it's compelling. It can't sound like other people's. It can't sound similar. It's got to be differentiated. So great storytelling will lead to a great business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also agree with you. As I like to say, storytelling, it's all about emotional engagement. It's about emotional connection.
Oh, I like that a lot. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
You're tapping into an emotional vein.
absolutely. And as a follow-up question, do you see a big difference? And this might be with the end consumer or customer, but do you see a big difference between B2B companies and B2C companies doing storytelling right?
I don't necessarily think I see a difference in how those stories are told. The content of the stories might be different. In B2B, you might be talking about things like ROI, although you're still trying to make an emotional plea to that end stakeholder. Whereas in B2C, you might be emotionally talking about what the patient issues is that you're trying to solve with the patient at the point of care. That's still important in B2B, but there's almost like another level of data that you need to be able to tell that story well in a B2B environment. It's a heightened standard.
Yep, yep. All right, let's move on to lesson number 8.
Lesson number 8 is like, know what you know what you don't know. It's really important to lean into your gaps. And as a founder, like, don't rationalize your luck. Realize how lucky you are to have potentially sold your business at the right point in time. Realize how lucky you might be to have signed a certain contract. Really great entrepreneurs do make a fair amount of their own luck, but it's luck nonetheless. And I think you can make your own luck by like surrounding yourself with a great team and understanding as a founder where you're strong and where you're weak, and finding people to really fill those gaps. So team construction is really important. You can get better team construction by telling a great story in market. But it's really important for you to almost like be grateful every day you wake up that you're sitting in your seat, that you have the honor and the privilege to lead the team that you're leading, and don't let success go to your head and make you think that something was lucky with skill.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to lesson number 9.
Ooh, lesson number 9 for me, and I learned this through YPO especially, was like always be learning. I'm turning 50, Rodrigo, in July, and there is not a day that goes by where I'm not learning something new. And really like taking the time at the end of the day to almost like, what did I learn today, and like jot down some notes. Because I think as founders, we all get very much stuck in our routine. We tend to be spending more time working on our business. In our business instead of on it, which are two separate things. One of the things we focus on at Startup Health is helping those founders really work on their business instead of in it. But for me, it's like always be learning. My Audible list is long. I plow through it in my commute every day or when I'm at home, and I'm just constantly learning new things. And I feel like when you're constantly learning, creativity is about free associating things that you learn with a problem that you might see in front of you. So the more you're exposing yourself to, the more creative you can be, and the more you can apply the things you learn to your own business.
This podcast, it's about the health innovation industry, and on that note, from your perspective, what are the best sources of information, books, courses, events, places where people can go to learn more about what's happening in this industry? There is a lot of information out there. Sometimes, I often feel that we are drowning in information, but we are lacking in wisdom. So if you were, but if you were to select just a handful of insightful sources of information or courses or books or events, what would you tell someone who really wants to go deeper and be able to learn from that wisdom? What would you recommend?
Well, one, I absolutely think post-COVID showing up to conferences is the best possible way you can do it. I hate packing for conferences, Rodrigo, but I love it when I'm there. And so just got back from the health conference in Las Vegas. I literally feel like I have a conference family that I got to see and catch up with everybody when we're there and see how the industry is moving forward. And I think that's really exciting and fun. And you get to see all of the companies displaying their latest innovations and demoing them. And that for me is super inspirational to watch and see. So I think, HLTH conference, Vive, which is going to be in Los Angeles coming up, is another great health innovation conference. Frontiers globally is a great one to attend. The HIMSS conference used to have 30 or 40,000 people attend. And they're all great places to see, technology kind of at its best and where innovation is happening. I think from a book standpoint, I've been leaning in a lot lately with, whenever someone new would come to my team at CloudWrite Rodrigo, I'd give them 2 books. One was The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, which for me is like the Bible of, all the stuff they don't teach you in business school and what you're going to face if you're running your own company. There's a book by Keith McFarland called Breakthrough Company, which has, for me, been like all of the great lessons that I wanted to learn about foundationally structuring a business. And then I kind of have gone a little bit farther down that path by taking a hard look at EOS. And we've done that at Startup Health with a book by Gino Wickman called Traction. And it really does give you a great framework on how to run your business, how to run level 10 meetings. And when you rely on a framework in your business, even if healthcare, it doesn't really matter the industry, it allows you to decompress yourself and actually spend more time as a CEO working on the things that you want to work on. Because a lot of times we get sidetracked by other people's issues and we don't have a framework to put them into. So having a framework allows you to, in a very neat and tidy way, say, oh, you know what, this is a great issue. I'm going to put it on our agenda for a level 10 meeting. Those types of things. So those would be books that I would recommend.
Yeah. Can you repeat the name of the author of the Traction book?
Gino Wickman.
Gino Wickman. All right. Cool. Thanks, Jamey. All right. So let's move on to the final lesson number 10.
The final lesson is going to be, I might have mentioned this a little bit before, but it's really about being intentional. The fact of the matter is, a lot of times we say we believe things, but when it comes time to rise to the occasion and act the way that we want to act, we sometimes fall down. And I think some of that is like about being really intentional. It's like, do you as a person know what your principles are? Know what your mission is? Does your company? And if you do, then like be intentional about it and do things to reinforce it. And when the time comes for you to test those principles, like stand up for those principles and live by them. Culture in particular is something that I think founders need to be really intentional about, because if you're not intentional about it and you're not proactively nurturing it, it tends to get away from you, and then your employees take over and certain things might work themselves into your culture that you don't want. And a culture is like a garden, and it's much harder to weed your garden after the fact than it is just to tend it and establish it right in the first place. And so I think being intentional would be the 10th big lesson for me.
Yeah, Jamey, what you're saying is music to my ears. I absolutely agree with that. I think that more founders, CEOs should spend more time on people and culture. It's not just about the product or about the top line. If you really want to grow and scale a company. Great, Jamey. So we're gonna go to the second part of the podcast interview, and we're now gonna be talking about predictions about 2024 specifically. And I want to say my quote again. It's not my quote. It's from Yogi Berra. But the quote says, "It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future." But having said that, I would love to do this with you. So let's go with your prediction number 1.
Well, a crystal ball I do not have, Rodrigo, but this would be my inkling of areas that I think are particularly interesting. So, like one, true innovation is about care models again and not about technology. There's a bunch of cool technology out there that can enable the innovation, but the innovation is about the new care model and not about the tech. So when you take a look like hospital at home, I mentioned this company before, Circle. They have a ring. It's called the Circle Plus that detects. It's FDA approved and detects 8 to 10 different parameters and can really enable hospital at home strategies in an effective way. The company that I'm currently working for, Coco Home, which I just joined a couple of weeks ago, they're using radar in the home to help, do things like detect patient falls, monitor sleep, and do all those different types of things. So there's a lot of really exciting innovation, but the only way that innovation matters is if you can plug in care models on the back end that use those innovations to provide better care. So for me, innovation is about the care models, not about the tech. That would be number 1.
All right, great. Let's go to number 2.
Number 2, and this one might be counterintuitive. Medicaid is the next great market for innovation. It's pretty incredible to me that more people are not focused on innovating in Medicaid. It's a huge market. It is a market that when you do innovate in, you are helping the people who need it most. And I think as a country, we are only measured by the people who are, doing worst in our society, if you will. And for me, like innovating in Medicaid brings care to those who need it, increases access. We've seen a ton of innovation lately, and I think there's a groundswell. Startup Health worked with Hope Lab, Town Hall Ventures, and others to launch the Medicaid sessions. So if you go to Health or Vive or any of those conferences right now, there will be Medicaid focused content helping founders found businesses there. Health equity is clearly a huge issue across the country. Every payer, every provider now has a health equity initiative. And companies like CityBlock are out there doing like amazing work when it comes to helping this population. I also think when you take a look at helping Medicaid, it's not just about equal access to care. It's about the social determinants of health that surround them and how we can ensure that there are no food deserts in those communities, that there's better access to education, better access to high quality food, and again, easy access to care. But I think it's melding all of those that really make a difference. And I sit on the board of a foundation called the Partners in Care Foundation, and a lot of their thrust is like innovation in Medicaid and Medicare. So I think this is a particularly attractive space right now.
This is interesting, and as you said, definitely counterintuitive, because if you think about kind of the numbers, Medicare, according to how many people are enrolled, there are like 65 million Americans on Medicare, but they tend to be the ones that vote the most. So healthcare, it's some people say that healthcare is very political, right? You can invest more money in Medicare because you will get happy voters, if you will. And then on the other hand, you also have, for Medicaid, there are 90 million, Americans enrolled on Medicaid, but 50% of those are children. And children, as far as I know, last I heard, they can't vote. So there is there is something interesting in what you're saying, is that there is definitely a trend. Maybe the trend is health equity, or maybe Medicare has already been, it's more developed and there is more innovation there, and maybe Medicaid, from a health equity perspective or from a blue ocean perspective, there is room for growth and room for improvement.
Yeah, I just think it's one of these things where the big part of being counterintuitive is like the money's not in it to a certain degree, right? Like Medicare patients, Medicaid patients, pay the least from a reimbursement standpoint, like all those different types of things. I think we're going to see Medicaid start to come a lot more on par with Medicare in terms of reimbursement. I think that's also going to open up a lot of opportunity.
All right. Okay, so let's go to prediction number 3.
Prediction number 3, I think, healthcare costs are escalating. They're going to continue to escalate, unfortunately. But that is demanding more of a need for transparency in the system. And I think that's especially around pricing. It's really, really hard these days, Rodrigo, to be like a good healthcare consumer. We don't have enough information. We don't know how to digest it. And there are companies out there, like Handle Health is one of them, that's in the Startup Health portfolio. They're really trying to bring transparency to the point of care so that people can make better and more educated decisions about where to get that MRI, where to get that knee surgery or back procedure. And that's something right now that there's not a ton of comparison shopping. Even though we do that on Amazon and everywhere else when we're buying a car, we typically don't do it with our healthcare, and maybe we need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, specifically, in terms of drug pricing, most people tend to think that it's pharma's fault, pharmaceutical companies' fault. When we talk about price transparency, when in fact, it's the intermediaries, and by intermediaries I mean, insurance companies, distributors, PBMs, pharmacy chains, some of the big ones, they call it the big health, companies. There is for some reason, I think it goes back all the way to the Affordable Care Act, where the government caps profit margins for insurance companies that they ended up buying and expanding their businesses by vertically integrating, by acquiring PBMs and providers and so on, because by doing that, they are able to to grow and expand their margins. But the interesting thing is that, for example, PBMs, they have the authority and the capacity to choose what drugs stay on a formulary and which ones doesn't.
Yep.
So it's I think there is something uh, interesting, and I'm still trying to understand more about this, but there is like some misaligned incentives, in terms of be able to provide full transparency to the end consumer. So kind of my follow-up question to you, Jamey, how can this be fixed? Is there something is there something, I don't think that, especially these integrated groups, they don't have an incentive to be fully transparent. That's my point.
So I went, Rodrigo, to the pharmacy the other day, and they gave me my prescription, and it was like, this will be $75. And I was like, what? And then, one of my friends is the founder of GoodRx. So I said, well, what's the GoodRx price? We went through this whole thing. They ended up being able to give me the prescription for $16.50, right? And it's like, okay, most people don't know that those types of programs exist. Although GoodRx, great company, obviously has done a lot of good for a lot of patients out there and helping them procure their prescriptions for less money. But a lot of people still don't understand like how this all works. So it's confusing, and there's got to be a way to simplify it. And I don't know that my crystal ball has a solution in mind. I'll tell you that when you take a look at the industry, it's kind of like there's such a defined process, like how a drug gets to market, and turning that, then that costs X billions of dollars, and then the drug company has a patent, or they're on that drug and owns the IP for a while, and then it goes into generics, and all of a sudden the price drops. It's a very long process. So for me, it's like, I think when you take a look at how like the vaccinations came to market, and that expedited process from a drug approval process, like we need more of that happening in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move to the next prediction. I think it's prediction number 4.
So obviously, AI is creating a huge jump in capabilities versus other exponential technologies. I think, back in the day, people were talking about like blockchain and 3D printing, and while all those are still incrementally moving things forward, I think the one that's really taken hold, and it's largely been because of the jump of OpenAI and ChatGPT and large language models, is really artificial intelligence. And so from that perspective, healthcare is using AI, one, to screen films in radiology and as a clinical decision support tool for doctors. I think it's a very successful part of the market. But the concept now of, can we use large language models to help address things like loneliness and other patient issues is really, really compelling. So I'm really excited about the future for AI and where it sits. I'm not worried about AI replacing doctors. I'm looking at it more as a tool to really improve the experience for doctors and patients alike.
Yeah, I agree. I also, the one thing I would say about this is like, I agree that all of this is just, the tip of the iceberg, and this is going to, evolve super quick. I don't know how fast we're going to be able to see adoption. I think that, in terms of reducing admin burden, admin work, that's, the use case where I see, lots of applications, and I see that
Yeah.
rapid adoption. But where I want to see, where I really want to see faster adoption, it's in terms of clinical support and decision making, supporting physicians and other healthcare professionals to be smarter doctors.
And by the way, Rodrigo, on that note, they're linked. If you can reduce the admin burden for a doctor, they can practice more at the top of their license and spend more time focused on what the AI might be telling them, right? So those two things for me are very, very linked.
Yeah, agree. All right, so let's go to prediction number 5.
Prediction number 5. The capital markets will remain challenging until there is a fundamental catalyst for change, or consumption is radically changed. I think if you take a look at all of the broken unicorns, you have Olive that was almost $900 million, Cerebral $462 million, LME 323 million, Babylon 630 million. Like the numbers are staggering, and these companies are now gone. And all that money that could have been deployed in other areas is gone as well. So from that perspective, healthcare, when you take a look at the healthcare unicorns out there, there are now fewer than there had been in the past. And they are much more focused on the companies that are like incrementally doing something different, a devoted health or a city block health that are providing care, rather than some of the technology companies that are driving it. So I'm going to be really curious to see with an election coming up, with the what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in the Ukraine, what would change a market given those market dynamics. And I've not seen a catalyst yet to do it.
Yeah. I would add two more things, two predictions to that same thing. The first one is I see digital health sector, some activity like in IPOs. I think that is going to start to warm up. Companies like Hinge Health, for example.
Yeah.
Omada, Included Health. Those are three examples where I think they might be an IPO in 2024. Hopefully, we see some IPO activity in digital health. And the other one is that I also expect some M&A activity and also some startup bankruptcies as some of these smaller companies run out of cash.
By the way, that's absolutely going to be the case. I don't know. It feels like the Silicon Valley Bank issues were pretty much in our rearview mirror. But they basically said that 50% of the companies were going to be running out of cash over the course of the next 18 months. And that's starting to happen. I think Carter put out numbers that like 87 companies this year, that had raised over $10 million have shut their doors. And that's only going to increase. So I think you're definitely tapping into something there.
Yep. All right, let's move on to prediction number 6.
Prediction number 6 would be, look, we really need to solve for making healthcare a desirable career track again. The prediction is that we're going to continue to have physician shortages in our country, and the only way that we're really going to be able to solve them is with technology. But fundamentally, it used to be that you'd graduate from college and you're like, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, but I want to be a doctor or a nurse was like top of that list. And it's not anymore. We've experienced over the last few years a ton of physician burnout because working through COVID was really hard. We're asking our doctors to do more with less, same with our nurses. And in that environment, it just hasn't, young people today just don't seem to want to come out of school and become doctors. And this is the first time in history where we haven't been able to really fill residency programs. There are open spots in residency programs, some of the programs across the country. And that should not be happening. We need to be kicking out more nurses. We need to be making this a industry where there is a joy of calling again, and where there is, an opportunity to really figure these things out. Now with telemedicine, you can obviously load balance the system. You break down some of the geographic barriers, but I think fundamentally we need to be able to fix the root of the problem, which is making this a desirable industry.
Yeah. I think that one, you said this before, but I think that we have really good products. We have, access to amazing technologies. But I think that one of the industry's top priorities, it's people, human resources and talent. I think this is one of the points where, it's striking to me to see the problem of labor shortage. I think, we I was reading about this the other day. I think we have a shortage of 50,000 nurses and expecting around 120,000 physicians.
That's right.
A gap of 120,000 physicians by 2030. So you cannot write code and all of a sudden create more physicians. And as far as I know, you cannot clone humans, with AI or with CRISPR, at least not yet. So I think that that's one of the biggest issues, especially with an aging population here in the US. Is like, how is a US healthcare system going to be able to really take care of so much people, when people are leaving the job?
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think we as patients tend to take our providers for granted. Like, how many doctors do you know if you were to speak to them, they're like, I love my job. I'm so glad I picked this specialty. I'm so glad I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, when you speak to them today, it doesn't feel like that. It's like, oh, it's like I have to see so many patients a day. My patients don't appreciate what we're doing for them, and they feel entitled to the care and all these different types of things. And it makes it really difficult. We need to start loving our doctors again and treating them as and nurses and clinical teams and treating them appropriately in the environment. I mean, there's been more physician and nurse abuse with people coming in and attacking nurses, attacking their doctor. And it's tragic.
Yeah, yeah. And this, leads me to the final prediction. Prediction number 7, Jamey.
Look, I'm hoping for a return to kindness. My work on the Pink Sox board is important to me, and I really want us as a human race to start treating each other better. Like, it would give me a lot of hope when I say things happening in the Ukraine and the Middle East, and even here at home, and the level of anti-Semitism and those types of things. It really is worrying, and I worry about the world that my kids are going to grow up in. And I really want to leave it in a better place. And so I'm hoping my message to everyone as we enter the holiday season is random acts of kindness, be kind, and let's teach our kids kindness and not hate.
I love it. Love that, and I agree. Final question, Jamey, before we leave. What are the companies that you most admire in the health industry, healthcare, health tech, digital health, whatever you want to call it? Do you have a list of companies that you think these companies are doing truly amazing things?
Yeah, so I'd say there's kind of two tranches of those companies. One are the larger successful companies that have been out there and have really had an impact. So a City Block Health, a Komodo Health on the data side, GoodRx, big fan of that company for obvious reasons. But honestly, the smaller companies are the ones that really inspire me. Companies I've seen and worked with in and out of the startup health portfolio, companies out there like Prevent Scripts that during challenging times was able to raise capital and execute on their strategy around preventive care. There's a company in our type 1 diabetes moonshotted startup health called Levacure. And that founder has proven to be incredibly coachable and has a combination therapy that could serve as a real cure, getting diabetic patients into remission. We've got health equity companies out there, like a company called Greens, and Keelan and Isis, who are the founders there, just a great group of founders, on a mission to be able to help, their population eat more healthy. Companies out there like Epicured, which is a food as medicine business. There's just so many great companies out there. And every time that I do my coaching in startup health and I'm supposed to be helping them, I walk away feeling like inspired by the work that they're doing and impressed by the work of the founders. So those would be a little bit of a list.
Amazing. Great. Jamey, thank you so much for being here. Like always, you've always been like super generous with your time and with your advice, and I appreciate you. And I thank you for being here today.
I appreciate you as well. Thank you, Rodrigo, for hosting these very important discussions. If anyone wants to get in touch with me, they can on Twitter at Jamey Edwards or on Instagram or on LinkedIn. I wish you and your family and all your listeners a happy, healthy, and safe holiday season.